I have a question. You talked about in your study measuring the muscle activity, and the way I have been able to relate to Alexander technique, if I think about the muscles, I'll go crazy, like you. So I think about the concepts, because I started when I was 4. A lot of the things, that I probably still move the same way I did, and a lot of those things are good. But then when I decided to go into music, started using that brain that says, well, it believes in the culture of the competition, has to be perfect, has to be everything like you said, you have to be good enough. It's nothing to do with the music. The music brings joy, and but you start to invest in all of this. No pain, no gain. That's the teachers say that. Practice until perfect, and then practice until it's perfect even when you're on stage. So this whole perfection and fitting into an ideal that is not from your internal cues. So when I learned that when Gabby asked me to play and said something, I couldn't do it. But I can say, where's the space? And then I can go, oh, it's just a totally different thing to be playing from inside myself, which I probably did when I was 4. I'm sure I did. But now to be consciously playing from my own internal cues. And so I guess, that's very hard to quantify and to put into science. So I guess I'm wondering, where does it go from this inhibition and internal cues? How do we connect that to muscles?
Well, I think of itself, you don't. I didn't anyway. And so you gradually build up an awareness of what you're doing. And you also gradually begin to build up an ability to let those things go. Still working on that, even now. I think we're all, everybody's always working on that, because I suppose it's like learning to play an instrument. Your critical abilities just become more and more acute as you go on with it. So, when you're 6 years old, you don't really think, I don't know, because I didn't play an instrument then, but you don't really think much about anything. You just kind of do it. When you're 16, it's pretty much the same. But when you've been doing the Alexander technique for 6 months, you're then beginning to build up some awareness of what it is you're doing. And so for me, that is what you're really aware of, rather than each individual muscle. We had to learn it all as teachers, so we knew what we were putting our hands on and how the muscles work, and how we were we as an entity are structured. And we also looked a lot at the mental connection of things, which I think is also that, or the cognitive aspect of things, which I think is something that a lot of Alexander teaching doesn't do. But when a violin teacher who's not related to the Alexander technique puts something up like all the muscles that you use in violin playing, and somebody says, oh yeah, that's really useful, or somebody when I'm teaching says, yes, but I want to know which muscles I'm using, I'm sort of going, dull, because that's not where it's at. It makes no difference to know that you're stiffening pectoralis minor or contracting it, or that you're pulling your shoulders forward so much that the muscles in the back of your scapula that join it onto the back, those are being pulled on, and it makes no difference whatsoever to know that. You have to be able to register that you are pulling your shoulders forwards and up yourself, and you have to know how to begin to learn to let those things go. So those are the things that, this goes back to Demago's question, really. Those are the things that eventually I was able to bring into my violin playing. But I had to bring it into all sorts of other things in my everyday life first. And I suppose it was only really then, I'd been on the training course for about a year, when I looked at the violin again. I went through a stage of bringing my violin along every Saturday to the training course, and I'd have a 15 minutes with the teacher, you know, Brian Dorr, who ran the course at the time. And I looked a lot then at the chin and shoulder rest setup, which I hadn't really done before, and how to pick up and hold the violin differently. So he started me off on that and took me a long way forward. But I couldn't bring myself to do it for about a year at least. And then I think training on the course got fairly intense again towards the 3rd and 4th year. So again, I didn't really have time to really work on the violin. So again, there was a gap. And I think I started working on it again when I'd actually qualified. And my interest was more sparked again, not my interest, but you know, my interest in wanting to look at the actually how do you play the violin was more sparked by starting to work as a teacher with musicians and starting to work at the conservatoire. And then I worked again, I stopped again for probably about 10, 15 years when I was doing all the degree, PhD, and then later the MSc. And I started working on it again about 10 years ago. And I think that's when I've really got to grips with being able to play it in a way that doesn't hurt my shoulder. But it took a long time because it was such by then it become a really chronic pain problem. It's just a persistent pain problem that wouldn't go away. And I needed to look also into the persistent pain side of things, which, you know, you probably know that approaches to persistent pain over the last 10 years has changed a lot. And it was really understanding that helped me in the last bit of being able to let go of my shoulder issue regarding playing the violin. But I think that I was able to let it go in the way that I was because I'd done so much work in the Alexander technique by then. So I don't know whether that answers your question or not, Joan. It's a bit long-winded, but it's not as simple. I don't really understand. I don't really know what it means to say, how do I play from within myself? I have an awareness of what I'm doing in terms of pulling my shoulder forwards or standing on one leg. And it's my awareness has had to become kind of uber acute to be able to work on my own violin playing because it is so habitual and because I've spent so many hours, like, well, not as many as you two, but so many hours practicing in the violin in a way that led to all those problems to come to a head.